It's that time of year. The nights are long and cold. I've got my Donatello stocking hanging up. I've got Beanie Babies, Power Rangers and Lego hanging from the tree. I'm drinking hot chocolate from a Game Boy mug, and I'll soon settle down to play some N64 and watch Muppet Christmas Carol. Because that's the thing, we all have different Christmas traditions. My wife, for example, who was born in Holland, where Christmas often plays second fiddle to Sinterklaas at the beginning of December, hence my Sinterklaas present this year. Instead of Father Christmas coming on a reindeer-led sleigh to fill the stockings of good little boys and girls with toys and treats made by his elves, St. Nicholas comes along on a white horse to fill your boots with treats. And yeah, I guess there's also the whole Krampus and Nectarpeck thing, but never mind all that. So I thought I'd share a few Christmas memories and talk you through what a Christmas day looked like when I was a little one. I'll admit, I don't remember too much about the run-ups to Christmas. I remember that I'd always wait for the autumn and winter Argos and Index catalogues to be released to see what toys were out that year. It's kind of sad that that's been lost. It was like the kick-off to the holiday season for me. In nursery school, we'd get the obligatory visit from Father Christmas, and we'd have the local school fairs to go to. Then later, in primary school, things would wrap up a little early with maybe a video day or a toy day, once the nativity was out the way, of course, in which I played a hazelnut, which is a story in itself, and sadly I can't find any pictures of it, so you'll just have to use your imagination. And then we'd go get our Christmas tree, which my mum would always insist on it being a real one, which are nicer, but definitely a bit more of a pain to put up. As far back as I can remember, and even further than that, we'd always have a real tree in the corner of the living room or at the bottom of the stairs, although clearly the size and shape would be different every year. And that would always be in contrast to the bright white and gold artificial tree at my grandparents' house. To this day, you can still count on there being a real tree there. Being the youngest of 3 children, things were a little different for me than it was for my sisters in the 90s. There's nearly 7 years difference between us, so as they headed towards their teenage years and were more interested in some smaller presents, for me it was still all about the toys. Every Christmas Eve I would help put out the carrots for the reindeer, the mince pies for Father Christmas, and I think even a little bit of brandy too. None of this milk and cookies rubbish. Brandy. I'd always try and stay up until midnight so I could see Father Christmas coming down the chimney, as we actually had one, but I'd always end up falling asleep, often dreaming that I had seen him. When I'd wake up, at the bottom of my bed would be a stocking filled with chocolate coins and other little things that my mum would have put together, and if we opened it in bed, it'd buy my parents a little bit more sleep, but not much, as me and my sisters would be distracted before getting to the main hall of gifts downstairs. But usually we were too eager to get downstairs and start ripping paper. I still have one of those Power Rangers toys. Not the original one, obviously, as the plastic on them was so cheap that they'd snap almost instantly, like this one has, but I still love them. Now, we weren't allowed downstairs until my dad had gone first. He'd grabbed the camcorder while me and my sisters waited at the top of the stairs so he could quickly film the room before we attacked it. Although, it looks like in 1993 I may have overslept a little, which is definitely my preference these days. Those Aladdin pyjamas, on the other hand, were awesome, although the fact that they glowed in the dark was a little counterproductive. Being the youngest, rather than cassette players and other gifts that tended to be pricey but took up less physical space, again it was all about the toys. So while my sisters got an armchair each to put their gifts, I tended to get the sofa. But we had to be quick. We had to tear through our presents and we'd end up lining them up in a little display because there was a lot to get through before lunch. Once we were done with ours, there was the treats for the dog, who would have been diligently sniffing everything that we unwrapped, and then there was all the other pets that we may have had at the time, because it tended to be a bit of a zoo at our house. You see, we've always had dogs. They've always loved Christmas too. From having everyone at home to the smell of the turkey filling the house, it's not quite Christmas without a dog for me. After lunch it was off to our grandparents, first my mum's parents, where we'd swap a couple of little gifts, and my Greek nana would be in the kitchen making treats. And then to my dad's parents, where they'd fill little Tupperware lunchboxes with fun-sized chocolate bars. Cadbury's Caramel, Rolos, Maltesers, and do they even make soft fruits anymore? When we got home in the evening, that's when the play would really start, and we'd dive into our little display of presents. That's also when my mum would open her presents, because she'd been cooking all morning to make sure the turkey was ready in time for us to eat and get out the door. God, 1994 is looking good to me. Power Rangers Blaster, the Tiger LCD game, a big cuddly Red Ranger, some Power Rangers treats, books, something else Power Rangers, not to mention the Morpher, which I also still have. Last year I actually found a picture from that Christmas, and I appear to be wearing Power Rangers socks with koala slippers. Firstly because I'm a fashion icon, clearly, but also because my dad occasionally had to go to Australia on business, and I'm guessing that was one of the years. Being in the UK, if you were really lucky, you might get a little bit of snow on Christmas Day, or at least some frost, to make it at least feel like it was a white Christmas. Between Christmas and New Year's was always the time of year that I got to see my auntie and uncle, as they lived in France at the time. You never quite knew what you were going to get as a present from them, depending on whether they'd been travelling that year. One year it might be a pogo stick or a kite, and then another year it might be an African circumcision mask or a hand-carved hippo-tooth knife. That one was a good one, actually. Now, I don't have any footage of it, but Christmas 1997 was the year that I first got one of these. Not this actual one, I don't have any charcoal N64s anymore. I swapped them for the Fantastic ones, and can you blame me? I mean, look at this thing, it doesn't get much more late 90s than this. You see, for a while my parents had said that I couldn't have a TV in my room. It may have been that my sisters got them as birthday gifts, and then me getting one too would have been a bit too spoiled little brother, as CRTs were quite expensive at the time. So instead, after a little while had passed, my dad went into the loft and dusted off an old black and white tube TV that you had to manually tune like a radio. Now, I didn't care that it was black and white, I loved that thing. In fact, it may even be where my love of retro tech started. Of an evening, I would go down to the living room, tune the Skybox to the Disney Channel, and then go watch Home Improvement on my little black and white TV. After a while, I mean, you could barely notice that it was not in colour anyway. But 97, that had a couple of little surprises in store for me. One was my own small, probably 11-inch colour CRTV for my room. And why was I getting a colour TV now? Because that was the year that I got a Nintendo 64 with GoldenEye packed in. Now, we never had an NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Master System, Sega Mega Drive, none of that. We'd had an Atari ST, and then we'd had a Game Boy, and it was just Game Boy ever since. But this was the first real games console that I had, and I was hooked. I was terrible and couldn't get past the first level, nor could I even figure out how to play the other game that I got, Turok 2, but it didn't matter. GoldenEye was the game that I had, and I loved it. But you see, that's just it. As a kid, Christmas was the time where toys, games, movies, family, food, it all just got mashed together. And many of my best memories are often rooted there because sort of all childhood memories were condensed into one package. If you were to look around the room here, you'd see things that I either once got for Christmas or my love for them may have started there. But we all have our memories, we all have our traditions. So to you, wherever you are and however you choose to spend the holidays, Merry Christmas.